Hello and welcome to the Bright Talk Lean ITSM channel and Agile DevOps ITSM channel. My name is David Smith. I'm the president of Micromation and I'm going to be your presenter for today's session. We're going to talk about using Lean to enable fast, safe change management and specifically Lean CSI. If you have any questions during the session, please type them into your chat box and I'll refer to them at the end of the session, time permitting. The session is going to be recorded and made available for future reference as well. So let's get started. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. I always like to start my sessions with a story. And today's story is about big MSP. MSP is a managed service provider. This is a real story. I spent a lot of time over the last 10 years or so developing Lean CSI. And over the last 16 months, I have been working with big MSP, who is a managed service provider, and we did a number of different improvement strategies in their organization. And I did many engagements that involved this methodology, and I'm very excited to kind of show you the success of that program. And specifically, the story I'm going to share with you is more related to the change management and problem management areas. So this story goes back over the last 16 months, and it kind of goes like this. The reason I got called into big MSP is because they were having a lot of issues with things not working properly, and specifically when we looked at, what was the trend and where were the issues, one of the areas of concern was around change management. So big MSP has, hundreds of customers, and what they saw was a pattern developing where they kept having a lot of their changes, failing, and these changes would then cause incidents, and the incidents obviously are not acceptable to their customer base. So this issue was concerning them, and they needed to get it under control, and so that's where my focus was. Now, if it couldn't get any worse than that, it's one thing to have failed changes, but when you look at what's the impact, well, failed changes in their case, since they're a managed service provider and they kind of provide this for fees, they have penalties often built into their performance. So if you have a failed change and it causes outages, it can cause, sometimes thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in penalties. What also causes grief is that if they happen at certain times of the year, around Christmas, or in Canada we have the registered retirement savings period for the financial institutions. If they have outages, that these are significant, things that end up in the paper, and then you get bad press, and we start to see names being tossed around, and news travels fast, and then, all your customers are kind of talking about what's going on, why is this happening, what are you doing about it? And so there's a lot of pressure on them to get things under control. So if you step back and say, well, why is this happening now? What's driving all of this change? It's really all around the disruptive technologies that are happening and have been happening for the last 4 or 5 years. This is, social media, mobile, analytics, cloud. We've got blockchain, we've got robotics, we've got AI. All of this stuff is just going crazy. And a lot of these companies are trying to get ahead of the curve because there is so much disruption going on with the forces of like the Uber model and Airbnb and Netflix and Amazon, that these companies, if they don't keep up, they're going to fall behind. And so they're driving a tremendous amount of workload and change as a result of this. So that, caused their workload to significantly go up, and not having a flexible, scalable model that could react as quickly put severe pressure on their ability to manage the throughput of change, the quality of change, and the consistency of it. So that's where I came in, and how I helped them develop a better process using a methodology that I created and marketed probably about 3 to 4 years ago, and I did a lot of Bright Talk sessions on it back in 2016, and also developed a number of supporting methods and tools and artifacts to help with that. And I'm going to kind of describe how we used it for big MSP in finding and eliminating their weakest links. And this concept is one that is also presented, called the theory of constraints, and that's kind of the basis of how it all works. And there's 4 basic steps that we took them through, and they're not that complicated. They're simple steps in terms of Lean and some of the other technologies that are out there. But first part is listening to your customers and understanding what's important to them, where their pain points are, what their desires are, and understanding really what they perceive as value. So this method is very outcome-oriented and based on value. And the next step is then to look at, well, where is it that you're delivering value? And we have a method that we look at what you are doing and the services and or processes that you provide and how it delivers value or maybe not deliver value. And we use a method called value stream mapping to do that. And then we have a simple model called Lean CSI. It's got 5 steps, and I'm going to take you through those steps of how they work. It is a light version of Kaizen, and I'll explain what Kaizen is shortly. And then we mix in another secret ingredient of Agile and DevOps. And those are pretty hot, topics these days because that's what a lot of other companies are using to actually perfect and make change work, consistently and work well. So these are the sort of the ingredients of what makes this method work and find the weakest links and focus on what's important to get the value that customers are seeking. So with that kind of background, I'm going to now talk a little bit about the theory behind what is Lean CSI all about, how it works, and then show you examples of it in the context of big MSP's journey in fixing their change management process. So first of all, Lean CSI, by the nature of its name, really focuses on the value proposition for the customer. So we look at, well, what are the things that customers really, seek and value and find are important? And it's pretty well understood in the IT space anyways that there's kind of 3 areas that are really value oriented. There's providing support, making sure that, things work the way that they expect them to work. Providing capability as quickly as possible, and this is really important with all of this digital transformation that's happening now, and also providing advice and innovative solutions and coming up with the better way to do things. So customers value these things, and that's really what's important. And to harness that, we use the principles of lean thinking. Lean is very outcome oriented. It's all about what's important to the customer, and then finding out what is the most simplified path of delivering the value that the customer requires, so that it's inexpensive, it's quick, it works the way you expect, and that it's high quality. So those are kind of the principles and the value proposition of the lean aspect. And then the mechanics of it's based on a lot of things that in IT that we're very familiar with and used to, and over the last 15, 20 years, ITIL and ITSM, there's been a lot of intellectual capital and information put into these libraries, the IT infrastructure library is an example. In there are all kinds of processes, and specifically CSI, continuous service improvement, has some good mechanical things. So we take the CSI component from ITIL and Lean and some other ingredients, and we mix those together into a quick and lightweight, repeatable method for making improvements. And it's based on the approach that's referred to in Kaizen. Kaizen is a Japanese term for continuous improvement. And the way it works is that you take the principles of Lean. Lean has 5 dimensions. It focuses on the processes. It focuses on the customer, what the customer wants, your organization, how you're structured, It also gets into performance measures, and it really focuses a lot on changing the behavior and attitude towards how you serve your customers. And this is interesting because, big companies tend to, have their culture and everything, and often you have to change the way people think to get them to think more in a continuous improvement fashion. So that's the lean aspect of this. And then what we mix in with that is the continual service improvement, and people, if you've been through any ITIL training, a lot of it is based on the Deming model. Professor Deming, who was an expert in quality systems, spent a lot of time with the Japanese figuring out the better way to implement things, and it was kind of the root and the basis of lean thinking, which was then perfected by the Toyota production systems. But on top of that, there was some other great work that was done by some other groups, and specifically Six Sigma, and it got a different model that was also applied, another great continual service improvement model, and it's referred to as the DMAIC model, where they define, measure, analyze, and improve, and then control things. So the Lean CSI kind of takes a combination of all of these things and melds it together into a light Kaizen-based approach, which is then time-bound into short durations to produce results quickly, or at least verify hypotheses that what you believe is to be a fault, it confirms it. And so it uses a little bit of Agile and DevOps as part of this as well. And how it does that, the best way is to explain is in what I refer to as the domino effect. The domino effect, if you can visualize in your mind a series of dominoes, and each domino kind of represents a different characteristic. And the way, if you've ever done build dominoes, you kind of start with the end domino and you sort of work backwards and you set them all up. And as you work backwards, really what you're doing is you're decomposing or taking the outcome that you want and decomposing what are the steps to get to where you want to get to. And so if you start with the outcome, which is really the strategy and the outcome and the benefit the customer is looking for, and you step back and say, well, what are the enabling factors for me to deliver that result? And you might see that, oh, it's maybe the service, or it's these people, or these skills, or this process, or maybe it's a technology. And you define what those enabling factors are. And then you step back further and you say, well, what are the specific challenges that are inhibiting or preventing those enabling factors from achieving your strategy? And those challenges are often, issues, gaps, risks, waste. They could be various things that are kind of in your way, preventing you from being successful. And once you decompose the challenges, then you look at, well, what initiatives could I take to remove those challenges and unblock those things that are preventing our capabilities or enablers to achieving the outcome and the strategies. And so you work backwards in decomposing this storyline, and then you put controls in place to say, okay, I'm going to tip the first domino by executing these initiatives. And I'm not quite sure that this is going to work, but I'm going to put some good controls in place so that I will guide it and improve it and steer it and provide guardrails to make sure that at the end of the day, it produces what I want it to achieve. So in effect, the way the domino effect works is that it starts with outcomes and it looks at the current situation. It uses a lot of root cause analysis techniques that you would use in problem management. It really is laser focused on what's important because it's all geared towards what the customer wants, and it's highly controlled to make sure that you get the results that you want. So if it steers off course, you're able to quickly course correct and get it back on plan. So now let me give you examples, and these are specific examples for big MSP. Voice of the customer, we spend a lot of time meeting with the customer, understanding what their goals were, what their issues and challenges were. And we built, kind of models that said, okay, customer, one of the things is the hot button is stability. And they gave us examples of where does stability affect them, and what are the examples of where they're seeing issues. And they would give us problems with patching and lack of controls and the change process not working, and we don't have an end-to-end view of our processes, and incidents, major incidents process not working. So we would collect all of the stuff. They'd also give us objectives like, look, I want you to reduce the number of occurrence of incidences, but I don't want you to stop doing changes. We need changes to happen, and we need you to do them faster. So you got to do them faster, better, and cause less incidents. So this is really, really important to the customer. So then we would take that information, and I have a tool, and this is an artifact in the Lean CSI methodology called a canvas. It's called a value canvas. And using the domino effect, you start with the outcome and you visualize what it is that the client's trying to do. In this particular case, a client was trying to prepare themselves for digital transformation. They needed stable environment. They needed to rapidly roll out new projects, and they needed good quality, innovative ideas from this customer to help them overcome technical barriers. The customer, what we provided in the big MSP is advice. We provided new technology. We restored things when they were broken. We helped design things, and we helped prepare things. So that's the value stream that our customer provided. And this value stream is actually right out of the book of Verisum. Verisum, if you haven't heard about it, is a new model that kind of talks about digital transformation methods, and you're going to hear lots about it soon because it is definitely the way to go. This model is based on Verisum, that we looked at what their enabling factors were. We then took each of those items and said, well, what are the challenges? And we were able to take each of them and break it down and say, well, gee, in this case, we don't have a focus on continual improvement. There's breaks in our delivery chain. We don't have configuration standards. We don't have a way to do problem management, testing, or urgent requests. We also are struggling with changes causing major incidents. We don't have enough bandwidth. We're stretched to the limit. We're struggling with technology leadership. And so then we said, well, what can we do about those? I mean, what's in our own control that we can make a difference? So we said, geez, we could put governance in place. We could better manage our resources. We could look at improving our change management value stream. We could do better root cause analysis. We could do a better job of release deployment and management of how we deploy things. And so we started to formulate, a roadmap. And then we said, how would we measure this? And so how would we know it's working? So this is where we put controls in place. The controls look at making sure that things stay within the guardrails and that we get the outcomes that the customer wants, and we can go back and show evidence that it is working. And even if it didn't work, where did it not work and what was going wrong with it? So we do that on a value canvas. And then that canvas helps us create better improvement plans that our employees embrace, because this is not done in a vacuum. It's done with a group of people that really understand the issues that are customer facing. So they are the ones that formulate the ideas together. They do it in a group. It's done in a team environment. This is the notion of where sort of that DevOps principle comes into play. So they vet it very strongly. They're very passionate about how they build the structure of this. It creates a very strong value proposition. And since it's the employees' creation, it creates alignment that they get behind, and it's their story. And so they have the story, and now they're going to make sure that this happens. And often that's where we see things go awry in change management, is you can't get people to buy into things because often it's one person's idea as opposed to a group of people's ideas. So this whole method helps us get to a better place quicker, and it avoids wasting time because everybody has contributed to it. So in the end, it helps reduce risk and getting things done. So how do we execute? We use a light version of Kaizen. Kaizen, as I explained, was a method that kind of used a systematic approach, and I like the Kaizen variation that uses the Lean and Six Sigma together. And so there's a lot of tools in there that I like to use that are root cause analysis based tools. And they're really good for looking at where the weakest links are. And I have 5 steps that I follow through this, and I have a step-by-step procedure on how this all works. And you start with the outcomes and work yourself backwards, and you start to articulate what these components are. And you build these strategies, and you spend a lot of time on defining, well, what is the real issue? What's the gap? What's the risk? Where is the waste happening that causes these errors that ultimately drain our resources and causes our workflow to clog up or stop? These are often referred to as user stories in Agile. We use that term. And these user stories we get from doing things like a value stream analysis. And how it works is value stream analysis is that you take a very light view of what your process is and you map out in a workshop, the steps that it takes to do a release and deployment. And here's an example of release and deployment value stream. And you just put this on a timeline and you say, well, here's the 39 steps that it takes. And then you go through and you color code as to which steps actually drive or can deliver value versus which ones you have to do, but they don't really drive value for the customer, but you got to do them anyways. And then which ones provide absolutely no value at all. And you map this out, and what we found when we did this analysis with big MSP, all the red items here were non-value added activities. All of those things are eligible to be automated and or to find a better way to improve it. And then we look at the next step of saying, well, what is the impact of this? So we took actual examples of where failures occurred, and we went back and overlaid them onto the process and said, okay, this is where we're seeing the actual occurrences of these issues and where the root cause was. And what we were surprised to learn was that it isn't so much the change management process that was at fault, although it was sort of part of the issue. A lot of it was in release and deployment. Most of it, 90%, was in release and deployment. Release and deployment had issues with detailed design requirements, with methods of procedures, and the actual execution of things. So once we better understood and got a handle on where those root causes were, we were able to then take corrective actions. And how we got to that is that we used a tool called failure mode and effect analysis. It takes all the failure modes, it looks at what the root causes are, you assess what the exposure that you have to this, and what the likely occurrences of those failures are and how you would detect them and measure them. And once you understand that, you can start to model them out and understand specifically what it is that's killing you. And when we did that analysis, we found it was things like we didn't have ownership of an end-to-end change. We didn't know really how to do impact and risk assessment. We didn't have policies in place. We didn't have good models for detailed design requirements or methods of procedures. We didn't have the right categorizations. We didn't have good testing in place. We didn't have controls to check if the thing was going well. We were not focusing on time, and we were very time constrained. We had extremely high volumes, and we consistently didn't even know how to do root cause analysis. So all of these things kind of led to errors happening. So once we got that insight, we were able to say, well, we can fix that. That's in our control. We can do that by developing better standards to describe how we do things and what we call things, and develop sort of the principles and the guidelines, and develop models that better assess the risk and our ability to deliver the changes, and put controls in place so that we can kind of monitor and assess this as we go along. And hey, let's use Agile and DevOps techniques to actually roll this out and make it real. Because we don't have time to sit around here. We've got to get this done now. So we used an Agile and DevOps model to actually take these ideas and build them into sprints. And we had multiple sprints that we ran over a 30 business day time period. And each one had expected results and was measured. And how we rolled them out is that we had the development and the operations teams work together to actually produce the improvements that they were going to roll out and own as a result of that. So we got them working in a DevOps model right up front and got them very familiar with that approach. And the net benefit of that is that later when they actually delivered the changes, that they love that model, so they're starting to use it on an ongoing basis. But what does that look like on paper? Well, we had a 6-week timeline, which then we had a number of initiatives, which there were 4 that we needed to put in place. We took each initiative and we started pushing them out into 2-week sprints. And the sprints are an agile method to time box things that you get a collaborative group team effort to work on. And we did daily scrums where we had Kanban boards, and we put these things on the board, and we walked them through their initial stage to in progress to, where we have an issue, and people were all over this and behind it. And we had senior management, VPs, and everybody crawling all over this stuff. So it was really such a sight to see how people embraced and made this happen. We didn't stop there. We also had to put controls and governance in place to make sure that this could be sustained. So we took a traditional kind of approach that described the value stream of what makes change management work. We built into that some very tight controls, and we put monitoring and measurements in place to be able to verify that as changes go through the process, that there's checks and balances to make sure quality is happening and that we don't have to fix things at the end after they've failed. And we've backed that up with a governance framework that meets on a regular basis and continually monitors the whole thing as a whole, and is able to get feedback and performance issues as to what's working, what's not working. And they can reuse this model now themselves because they know how to use this model to correct and make improvements as they go. So that was put in place. And how we did that was that we developed not only policies and principles that we were able to support, but we backed them up with measurements structured in what we call critical to quality measurement trees. And these allow us to define what measurements need to be put in place to know whether things are working, as well as we defined a number of control points that checks a lot of the changes as they go through the model to make sure that they are going to work as planned. And those are our control objectives. So that's what they did, and the outcome was just amazing how it came together. They were able to error-proof their processes and catch things before they caused errors. And we all know what happens when errors occur. You end up doing rework. And when you do rework, you often are under tremendous pressure to self-correct and get it back in place, and that consumes your resources. So it further burdens the organization. So as a result of doing this and error-proofing, our rework time significantly dropped, and this allowed us to focus more energy on the actual change failure rate and get better at processing changes. So our change failure rate itself significantly dropped. And this was all being measured right from the very beginning. And as a result, penalties decreased. And for some of the accounts that they worked on, they dropped right to nothing because they were able to manage these and catch issues before they presented problems. They also are turning the corner and getting their volumes under control, although there's still a lot more work to be done here because digital transformation is not going to stop. It's going to continue to increase. It's going to get even more quick and at a higher pace and cadence. And they were able to increase customer satisfaction. A lot of these customers were threatening to leave. And now that they've seen the amount of effort, and customers were involved right from the beginning and part of this journey that they were on, so they're also able to retain those customers and renew their agreements. So at the end of this, what was most compelling that I got the most pleasure of seeing happening was the employees and how pumped up and enthusiastic they were to come to work to actually work on these issues, because they felt they actually were making a difference, and it was them and it was their ideas. They formulated the approaches. I just gave them the structure on how to do it. So the model really now has been transferred to them, they use this repeatable model on an ongoing basis and are fully embracing it. So the conclusion in this case is that this model works. And I kid you not, I did it many, many times, not only for this customer, but for other customers as well. It's a simple model. It takes a little practice getting through it the first couple of times if you've not done a Kaizen-based approach, but it's repeatable. It helps quickly get to the point and to identify what's important to customers, figure out what the waste is, find methods to reduce the waste, and then improve your execution and speed and reliability of doing this. And no better place than doing it on change management. It is probably the Achilles heel of most IT organizations. If they don't get that right, then that's going to hurt them or severely injure them in the longer term. So how would you learn more? Okay, great to hear the presentation, but there's kind of a lot of stuff behind this. And I went through and I made a list of here are the courses that I took and applied the principles of this. And I sort of took the I call it the secret sauce from each of these areas and built it into this one offering. But here's some courses. Verisum is in the heart of this. Lean IT Foundations, Scrum, which is Agile, DevOps, and ITIL. Obviously, if you don't have an ITIL background, those are sort of the base ingredients. I spent in all my trainings over the last 10 years at least $20,000 doing this, and lots and lots of times to perfect this. Now, to help you go forward, I believe in this so much. I think what you can do to fast track it is I put together a course called Lean CSI. I delivered this course the first time back in 2016, and I use this course actually when I do these engagements with the customer. I teach them the methods as I go through it. So as part of this, I teach them how this all works so that they can repeat afterwards. So you could take the course here, it's a 2-day course, and fast track it for a lot less money than what I spent and get to the point very quickly. The structure of this course is there's an introduction to the concept, which get into a lot more detail than what I covered in this session here. But then we look at the domino effect. We actually use case studies as we go through it. And then we use the value stream mapping. So I teach you how to do that. I teach you how to also build measurement models. I wrote a book on how to implement measurements for IT service management under the ITSMF umbrella back in 2008. So I'm using principles from that. Then I spent a lot of time using Six Sigma analytical tools. And this is where the problem management piece comes into place, because there's about 6 or 7 tools that I favor as I go through and analyze information to get to root cause. And then I wrap it up by giving the introduction to Kaizen, how it all works, Agile, the principles of that, the DevOps intro, so you get the concept of how those different technologies work, and then an introduction to digital transformation, because that's where the future is. That's where we're all headed, and you need to be prepared for that. So this is all in a 2-day course. There's no prerequisites or examination or certification involved with it, and I do have a class that I've got coming up in the short term. And to help get you started there, I've put together also what I call a Lean CSI starter kit. In here, I've got a listing of different tools, like I have a value canvas and CSI registers. I've got a number of e-learning courses and some virtual classes like the Lean CSI that I've set up, and as well also offering a boot camp. And a boot camp is if you have a case where you want to get this going and you want to fast track it and you want to teach a team how to do this, we use the 5-day boot camp, and you learn the principles of this. We work with a real live situation, and so we take your real life circumstances and we use that as the model. We go through and teach you how to use this and solve the problem at the same time. So it's very, very powerful. This is what I was using with big MSP. The starter kit, there's a link here. I've also attached it to this Bright Talk session. You can click on it, go check out all of the offerings I put in there, lots of stuff. And I also put a promotional code here that if you type in the code, you'll get a surprise. There's some nice bonuses in there as well. So that's available to you. And at this point, I'm going to take a breath and see if there's any questions that I can answer from the audience. That is the end of my presentation now. So I hope you enjoyed it. And if there's questions, now's the time, type them in. And we've got just a few more minutes here before we wrap up. I'll wait a moment. While I'm waiting, I'll also share with you some of the other examples that we used this on. We did another Lean CSI on event monitoring and management, and I'm going to be doing a bright talk on this session coming up in the next couple of weeks. You know, the trials and tribulations of what not to do in trying to monitor your services and or IoT components. So we use this model to do some amazing things there. There was also another very interesting thing where we took security and patch management, which those two you wouldn't think are related, but they're very related, and devised a better approach to significantly speed up the ability to manage patching to make sure that your risks and compliance issues vis-a-vis security aspect were tightened up. And so we were able to take something that took a year to process down to a monthly cycle. And again, that's the beauty of doing value stream mapping, et cetera. Okay, I've got one question come in. Sorry, can you tell me the promotion code again? Yes, absolutely. Let's put it back here, write this down. Promotion code is 9GXBCV, as in Victor. Yes, so jot that down and click on that link. I put that also in the links in the attachment. I hope that that you act on this. As I said, it works. I would be happy to work with you as well. Some of the offerings I build in consultations with it as part of the offerings too, so you'll see that when you go through. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I would like to thank you very much. Thank you for joining me today. I look forward to speaking with you again in the near future. Stay tuned. There's going to be lots more interesting examples of this coming out shortly, and good luck, and I will